What we're going to be working on is this Honda HRX217, and what I'm going to do here, just in the interest of time, is I'm actually going to start tearing it down as I explain what the problem was. But what we're going to be doing is we're going to have to take the carburetor off and check out the auto choke system. So let me get you guys set up on the tripod here. Before I drop the carburetor off, I figured it might be useful to do a test and then actually show you guys how this thing is working or not working and supposed to be working. So what you have here, and it's actually working fine now, is here's your choke, which is normally closed when the engine's cold. And then you have this apparatus up here which moves back and forth. And the way I believe it works is as the engine heats up, this thing gets pushed out and then that opens up the choke. So at one point in time before this video, when I was checking it out, this was binding up here and it wasn't working. But right now it actually seems fine. There's nothing keeping it from moving, because as you can see, if it can't move, the throttle won't be able to move either, and that's what was causing the engine to run real fast. So I'm going to start it up here, and then so as you can see now, the engine's warm and this thing is now pushed over here and the choke is pretty much open. So apparently for some reason the engine will not run without the choke on. So either it's not getting fuel or the carburetor is still clogged up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull the carb off and we're going to soak that in some gasoline while we check out the rest of the fuel system and make sure that's okay. So like I said here, what we're going to have to do is pull the carburetor off. So in order to get the carburetor off, you got to pop the air filter out, which is just these two clips up here, and then the air filter just comes right out. And then it's kind of an interesting design. I really don't like it, but the screws which hold the air filter housing on actually hold the carburetor on too. They go all the way through. And it's a 10mm socket. Oh, obviously it's a Honda. All the stuff on here is going to be metric. So we'll loosen them up, and as I'm taking these off, I'll start explaining to you guys what happened to this thing. So the owner, he would say that every time he used this mower, he'd always start it in the same spot. And pretty consistently, after 15 minutes, and usually no more, no less than 15 minutes, it would shut down on him. It wouldn't just shut right off, but it would start sputtering and choking, and then all of a sudden it would die. So that originally sounded to me like an ignition problem, like maybe the coil had gone bad, and after it heated up, that's when you would start to have problems, because that's usually what happens with the coil. If it was a fuel problem, I would have expected the problem to develop pretty much immediately, as opposed to taking some period of time like that. However, the user, or rather the owner, he decided that he would take the carburetor off and clean it anyway, since that would be cheaper than replacing the coil. And what happened was, is after he cleaned the carburetor out, that went fine. He didn't have any problems with that. But he put the carburetor back on and started it up, and all of a sudden the motor started racing. It was as if the governor wasn't working at all. And let me pull this carburetor off real quick, and then I'll get back to the story. So this just pulls straight out. And then we will pull the fuel line out. So make sure your fuel is off, and then I actually already loosened it up here so I wouldn't be struggling with it on the camera. But we pull the fuel line off the carburetor there, and then all we have to do is disconnect these linkages here. So let me swing the camera around so you can see that. These carburetors here are really very simple. There's not much to them. We can drop the bowl off just by taking this bolt out here, just another 10mm. And then all I'm going to do here is I'm going to pop the float off just by pulling this little pin out here. We pull that out, the float will come off. Be very careful you don't lose the needle here. That is just attached, it just slides in there. So we will go ahead and drop the entire carburetor along with the bowl into there. And we'll just let that, probably let that sit for about 15-20 minutes. While we got that carburetor soaking in the gasoline, I figured I would check out the rest of the fuel system, make sure there's nothing else going on. And what I started to do is I was going to drain the fuel out, because the owner said he did drain the fuel out just to make sure there wasn't any water in it. But what I figured was, if his gas can is contaminated, the water that he put in it was probably just as bad as the water he took out of it. So what I did was I started to drain the fuel, and I noticed that it was just barely trickling out of the fuel line here. So I removed the fuel line from the shutoff valve here, and what I found was that it was draining just as slow out of here. So what I think the problem is that there's a blockage probably right at the fuel pickup. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to drain the rest of the fuel out, and then I'm going to start taking the fuel tank off so that I can clean it out and figure out what's going on there. Alright, I drained the fuel out, and there is quite a bit of sediment down there, so I have to say that's probably where our problem is at. I'll show you that when I have more light. But to take the fuel tank off, first you got to take the 3 nuts off that hold the pull starter on, and they're all 10mm. And once you take those off, then your fuel tank just comes off like this. And there's really no need to separate the tank from this housing here. You can if you want, but I'm not going to bother with that. What I'm going to do is get some gasoline and swish it around in here, and then get my air hose, and we'll blow through here and see if we can get it unclogged. Alright, so as you can see here, I got some gasoline swashing around in there, and it's not a whole lot, but it should be enough that we ought to get something dripping out of here. And now there's actually nothing dripping out. Before, when I had a full tank in there, it was enough to push out some fuel, but now it's not even dripping at all. And you can see in there that there's something in there. I think it's a leaf. Whatever that white thing is, that's in there, and whatever else is down there, that's probably why our fuel tank is all clogged up. Pull this fuel line off here. I took the clamp off. So what we have here is we have this little fuel filter. I'll pull this out of here, and if anything, I'll bet you that this thing's probably clogged up, because there's nothing clogged up there. We can check that out and make sure fuel runs through there. But I'm pretty confident in that. And not that I recommend doing this, but if you blow on this fuel line, there's nothing wrong with that. So that's good. And that pretty much narrows it down to this little fuel filter here. So what I'm actually going to do is, I'm not going to film this, but I'm going to set this back up without the fuel filter after I clean out the tank, and we'll see if it runs. And if that's the case, I'll let you guys know.